Hello everyone, Nolan West here. Going into the closing days of session, Senate Republicans and House Democrats had agreed upon a framework of $4 billion in spending for $4 billion in tax cuts and leaving $4 billion on the bottom line, theoretically. I don't believe that would have been actually been there, but neither here nor there. The agreement was incredibly vague, which turns out made it no agreement at all. And session is now over, and the grand agreement amounted to nothing. So what actually happened? Well, the most important thing by far that we passed this year was unemployment tax relief. Our state's unemployment trust was billions of dollars in the hole, which was costing taxpayers $50,000 a day in interest. And this all amounted to an average of a 14% tax hike on every single employer in the state when they can least afford it. I mean, nobody can even find employees right now. There was broad bipartisan agreement on this, but House Democrats still ended up using this as leverage to negotiate for an extra $250 million in spending. And that extra spending, combined with the $250 million already agreed to last year, went to direct payments to frontline workers, which frontline workers to the Democrats basically meant anybody working a public-facing job, from nurses to Target employees. They will get a check. If they fall within certain income limits and didn't work from home and didn't collect more than 20 weeks of unemployment. And the application for that will be up early June if you fall into one of those categories. Those two things, UI and the frontline worker pay, diminished our surplus by about $2 billion. But a little over half of that money could have been spent unilaterally by Governor Walz if the legislature didn't allocate it. So it's good to see that this money is going back into the pockets of Minnesotans. You know, the grand agreement was designed to spend the rest of the surplus pretty much, which would have been disastrous because, well, one, it had been cobbled together in the final days of session with no oversight. And the legislature had already enacted 11.1% increase in the state's budget before all this. And given how uncertain our economy is going forward, I think it's far better to keep that money on the bottom line or return it to inflation-strapped taxpayers because everybody's getting squeezed right now. The idea of spending billions on new government programs just is not the right decision. And the one other place I would have liked to see this money spent was on Highway 65. I worked on getting Highway 65 in play in all this with $15 million in the transportation bill and $10 million in the bonding bill. But there were no agreement on either of those bills. Democrats wanted any money going towards roads to have corresponding money put towards light rail and transit, sometimes up to 40%. And with all the money we need to spend on our failing roads, it's like that made the bill catastrophically expensive. It just wouldn't clear both chambers. And the bonding bill, as is often the case, just keeps on having things tacked onto it until it's something that can't possibly pass. So to wrap this up, this session in all spent about $2 billion, and that was almost entirely spent on replenishing UI to stop the massive tax hikes and frontline worker checks. There was this grand agreement that I've been talking about, but that fell apart and is likely going to stay falling apart. Likely. I say likely because Governor Walz initially said he wouldn't call a special session, but now he's double backed on that, and now he says he wants to call one, but only if he knows exactly what the legislature will pass if he were to call them back. Senate Majority Leader Jeremy Miller has said that the Senate has no interest in a special session. But, you know, politicians say one thing, what actually happens isn't necessarily what they're saying, so we'll see. However, personally, I don't think there's a chance for a special session actually working. Special session in election years don't work very well in the first place, even when there's not this much money to go around. And there's no imminent government shutdown to force something to be passed because we already passed our budget. So personally, I don't think it's going to happen. But sadly, I am not always correct. So stay tuned. I'll keep you apprised if anything's actually cooking up. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you next time.